Galadriel's story is so much more than that of a mere wise and beautiful elf. What few people realize is that her journey was marked by wars, betrayals, impossible choices, and a thirst for power that, if left unchecked, could have forever altered the destiny of Middle-earth. Contrary to what many imagine, she wasn't just a bystander to the epic events that shaped this world. She was on the front lines, battling the darkest forces ever known. What if I told you that, for a brief moment, Galadriel could have become the absolute ruler of Middle-earth, that she was very close to claiming the One Ring for herself and reigning over all? But it was precisely that decision, this refusal of supreme power, that made her one of the most fascinating figures Tolkien ever created. Her story isn't just about magic or immortality. It's about the dilemma every great leader faces, when to hold on to power and when to let it go. At every step of her journey, Galadriel stood out as a unique force among the elves. From her rebellious youth in Valinor to her leadership in Lothlorien, she faced betrayals within her own people, wars against Morgoth and Sauron, and decisions that tested her very soul. Unlike the kings and warriors who made history with swords and crowns, Galadriel earned her position not through brute force, but through intelligence, patience, and strategy. But her journey was not a solitary one. She crossed paths with Fëanor, Melian, Celebrimbor, Saruman, Gandalf, Aragorn, and Frodo, each encounter altering the course of her story, and consequently, the fate of Middle-earth. And throughout this journey, she amassed a knowledge that few ever achieved, becoming not just a guardian of the world, but a reflection of its transformations. So, if you think you already know Galadriel's story, get ready to see a side that few dare to explore. This is the true tale of the most powerful of elves, a story of ambition, wisdom, resilience, and above all, the difficult art of knowing when to walk away. Few beings in Middle-earth could compare to the magnificence of Galadriel. Born among the Noldor, her presence shone like a golden sun at dusk. Her hair, a rare blend of gold and silver, was a mystery in itself, reflecting both the light of the trees of Valinor and the splendor of her own lineage. It's said that Fëanor, the most talented of the elven craftsmen, became so obsessed with her beauty that he tried to recreate that radiance in the Silmarils. Yet ironically, he never managed to capture it completely. And perhaps that is the enchantment of the elves. Their light cannot be imprisoned, only admired. What made Galadriel unique wasn't just her physical beauty, but the majesty of her spirit. While many elves were swept away by the pursuit of knowledge or the perfection of the arts, she carried an unquenchable fire within, a desire to discover, to explore, to rule. Her gaze pierced through time, seeing what others did not, understanding what few dared to imagine. She wasn't just any elf. She was a living legacy, a testament to the grandeur of Eru's firstborn. In a world where even the mightiest feared, the passage of centuries, Galadriel was an exception, for her soul seemed eternal. To grasp her greatness, one need only observe the respect even the proudest showed her. Gandalf himself, a Maya sent by the Valar, spoke of her with reverence, acknowledging in her a wisdom that transcended the bounds of Middle-earth. And what of men? To them, Galadriel was like a distant star, unattainable yet ever-present. Her mere presence was enough to inspire both courage and awe. Who would dare to challenge an elf who carried within her the light of the gods? What do we learn from this? That true beauty goes beyond appearance. It resides in the depth of the spirit and the firmness of purpose. Galadriel wasn't beautiful merely for the features Tolkien described, but for the strength that emanated from every gesture, every word, every choice. And that, dear reader, is a lesson that transcends fiction. For in a world where everyone strives to be noticed, few understand that the most powerful glow comes from within. But the elf's journey was only just beginning, for even though she was born in the bliss of Valinor, the call of Middle-earth resonated in her heart, and unlike many of her kind, she would not ignore that call. Galadriel was never just a bystander to the events that shaped Middle-earth. Since ancient times, her heart longed for something more than the tranquility of Valinor. When the Noldor rebelled against the Valar, spurred on by Feanor's fervor, Galadriel did not take the oath that led so many to ruin. Instead, her determination to explore and govern her own realm drove her to follow the exiles. It wasn't the promise of the Silmarils that motivated her, but rather the desire to build something grand, to forge her own destiny in lands yet unconquered. And if there is something that defines great leaders, it's that insatiable drive to push beyond the known limits. However, the journey to Middle-earth was not a leisurely stroll along open paths. Galadriel witnessed the dark side of the elves when Feanor and his followers massacred the Teleri during the kinslaying at Alqualondë. There, under the pale light of the stars, elf blood was shed by elves, and Galadriel, unlike many who stood by passively, took a stand. She wielded weapons against the Noldor attacking her kin, trying to protect those who until then had lived in peace. Picture the scene. An imposing elf, her hair glimmering like fire and silver, facing warriors driven by Feanor's obsession. It was one of the first moments where her true nature was revealed. She was not a passive leader, but a warrior when necessary. Even after that bloodbath, her determination did not waver. When the Noldor were prevented from using the stolen ships to cross the ocean, Galadriel didn't hesitate to take an even harsher route, the crossing of the Helcaraxe, the vast bridge of ice that connected Aman to Middle-earth. Bitter cold, relentless winds, and the constant threat of death loomed over those who dared to attempt this passage. Many fell, frozen, swallowed by treacherous waters. Yet Galadriel persevered. What does that teach us? That great ones never choose the easy paths. They press on, even when everything conspires against them. When she set foot in Middle-earth, Galadriel was no longer merely a princess among the Noldor. She was a survivor, a leader forged in trials. Middle-earth, a wild world brimming with challenges, did not offer the bounties of Valinor. Here, every realm had to be built with effort, every alliance won through wisdom. But Galadriel did not see this as a burden. On the contrary, it was her chance to become something greater than just a daughter of the house of Finarfin. And so, with her eyes fixed on the future, she pressed onward. While the Noldor sought vengeance against Morgoth and the conquest of the Silmarils, Galadriel sought something different, a place for herself, a realm where she could reign, not through force, but through wisdom. But to achieve that, she first needed to understand the peoples already inhabiting this land and forge alliances. And among those peoples, one in particular would leave a deep mark on her journey. Few among the elves could claim to have faced the trials that Galadriel endured. If the fall of Valinor had already left deep scars, then the brutality of crossing the Helcaraxe was a true test of body and spirit. Imagine traversing a desert of ice where even light seemed scarce, where every step was a battle against deadly cold. No fire burned warm enough, no promise of glory eased the pain in your bones. Yet Galadriel pressed on, leading and inspiring, for giving up was not an option. She wasn't just any elf, she was a survivor, and only the most determined could endure that march of death. The journey through the Helcaraxe was not just a physical challenge, but also a watershed moment for her mindset. She was no longer a young noble of the Noldor traversing hostile lands, but a leader forged in adversity. Each step on the ice hardened her spirit. Each night under biting winds prepared her for what was yet to come. And if there's a lesson, here it's that hardships don't destroy the strong, they shape them. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything seemed to crumble? Then perhaps you understand. Those who rise after a fall are the ones who truly command their destinies. When she finally arrived in Middle-earth, she found herself in a world at war. Elven realms were rising and falling in an endless cycle of battles against Morgoth and his minions. But Galadriel was in no rush to brandish swords without purpose. Her gaze extended beyond immediate conflicts. First, she needed to understand this new world, to feel its heartbeat, to learn from those who had trodden these lands before her. And so, she sought knowledge where few would dare, in Doriath, home to King Thingol and the enigmatic Mythology. There, Galadriel found something that even Valinor had not provided her, wisdom about her own destiny. Melian, an entity from across the seas, recognized in her a power that had yet to fully manifest. Many elves lived in the present, but Galadriel thought centuries ahead. And that is what sets visionary leaders apart from mere temporary kings. While others built walls to defend their lands, she built knowledge to safeguard her lineage and her legacy. But her learning in Doriath was not to last forever. Galadriel still did not have a home of her own, had not yet discovered her true purpose in Middle-earth, and, as always, her journey would carry her onward. An unexpected encounter would change her story, and an alliance forged in uncertain times would bring her ever closer to her ultimate destiny. Middle-earth was a stage for realms that rose and fell like the tides, yet Galadriel was not one to settle for the passage of time. While other elves sought temporary refuges, she desired a realm that was more than just a fortress against darkness. She longed for a lasting home, a land where the light of the elves was not merely a memory of the past, but a promise for the future. And for that, she had to master the subtle art of governance, patience, and, above all, alliances. It was in Doriath, among the Sindar, that she took her first steps toward becoming not just a leader, but a true matriarch among the elves. Melian, the Maya, who had chosen to remain in Middle-earth alongside Thingol, was a teacher like no other. Her knowledge transcended the ages. Her wisdom was rooted in the very fabric of creation. Galadriel absorbed every lesson, every secret whispered about the ways of the world. There in Doriath, she understood that power was not confined to armies or conquests, but to influence, the art of guiding without having to command. It was also there that she met Celeborn, a Sindarin prince whose loyalty and understanding of the peoples of Middle-earth would complement her own greatness. He wasn't an impetuous warrior like the Noldor, but someone who knew the rhythm of the land, a perfect balance to her burning ambition. But Middle-earth never allowed its inhabitants to remain at peace for very long. When the War of Wrath finally vanquished Morgoth and ushered in a new era, many of the Noldor elves chose to return to Valinor, accepting the Valar's forgiveness. Galadriel, however, refused. And here we see once again what set her apart. She was not an elf who looked to the past, but one who looked ahead. Valinor represented comfort, yes, but it also meant abandoning what she had fought to build. Middle-earth still needed strong leaders, guardians against the shadows that might one day return. Thus, while many departed, she stayed, reaffirming her commitment to a world that, though imperfect, still held unexplored possibilities. Her decision to stay led her to seek a new home, a place where she could establish her own realm. For centuries, Galadriel and Celeborn wandered through different lands, from Lindon to Eregion, testing alliances and understanding the movements of the world. They were never mere bystanders. Wherever they went, they influenced decisions and shaped events. However, it was only when they reached Lothlorien that something finally awakened within her. There lay potential, a land still wild, yet full of dormant beauty and magic. It wasn't just a refuge, but a stage where she could fulfill her true role as the guardian of light. And to protect this new realm, Galadriel would need more than just her own strength and wisdom. The shadows were stirring once again, and the Rings of Power would soon become the center of a conflict that would define the future of Middle-earth. Galadriel's story was far from over, and her destiny was about to become intertwined with forces far greater than any elf could have imagined. Time marched on, and Galadriel understood better than anyone that evil never sleeps. It merely reorganizes itself. In Eregion, under the leadership of the brilliant elven smith Celebrimbor, the greatest craftsmen of the Noldor were working on the creation of the Rings of Power. And it was an impressive feat. Artifacts that could preserve the greatness of the elves, allowing them to withstand the wear of time. But Galadriel, ever wary, sensed that a greater force was at play. Something in the air unsettled her. And when Sauron, disguised as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, presented himself as an ally, her intuition whispered a warning. This was nothing more than a dangerous game. Celebrimbor and his fellow smiths, fascinated by the knowledge offered by Anatar, pressed forward without heeding Galadriel's warnings. The result? The 9 for men, the 7 for dwarves, and the 3 elven rings were forged. But there was something different about the 3. They were created separately without Sauron's direct influence and possessed a distinct power, not of domination, but of preservation. Galadriel advised Celebrimbor to hide them, as she already sensed that Anatar was not who he claimed to be. And indeed, when Sauron secretly forged the One Ring, his treachery was revealed. Galadriel received Nenya, the Ring of Water, an incredibly powerful artifact that also came with a burden. As long as she bore it, she was bound to the fate of the rings, and consequently to that of Sauron. Even so, she accepted this weight, for she understood that only by keeping the power of the 3 rings in reliable hands could the elves preserve their last sanctuaries in Middle-earth. With Nenya, she transformed Lothlorien into a timeless sanctuary. Within its borders, the decay of the outside world was held at bay, and the elves could live as if they were still under the light of the trees of Valinor. But the power of Nenya was not absolute. It was linked to the One Ring, and as long as that artifact existed, Sauron's shadow could never be fully dispelled. Galadriel knew that a much larger battle was coming, and that the time of the elves in Middle-earth was running out. But as long as she still had strength, she would make Lothlorien a fortress of resistance against the darkness. And more importantly, she would unite allies in an effort that would change the destiny of the world. Among these allies, one of the most unexpected would emerge, and its presence would alter the course of the war forever. But Sauron was not an enemy who gave up easily. He had retreated to Mordor, and from there he would unleash a war unlike any Middle-earth had ever seen. Galadriel knew this. She felt the winds changing, the shadows shifting, and above all, she sensed that the time of the elves was coming to an end. Yet before that time ran out, a new journey was beginning to take shape on the horizon, a journey that would involve a small group of adventurers, a cursed ring, and a destiny that would change everything. Sauron's shadow was spreading once again, and the free peoples of Middle-earth needed hope, a spark that could light the way through the growing darkness. Fate then brought an unlikely group to Lothlorien, the Fellowship of the Ring, led by Aragorn, accompanied by men, a dwarf, an elf, a wizard, and above all, small hobbits, whose role in the grand scheme seemed, at first glance, insignificant. But Galadriel saw beyond what the eyes could perceive. When she received Frodo and his companions, she understood the weight of the journey they were about to undertake. And more than that, she saw the temptation and danger that the One Ring carried. When Frodo offered the ring to Galadriel, a moment of silence fell over Lothlorien. There lay the chance to rule over all, to reshape Middle-earth according to her own vision, to be a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, as treacherous as the sea. And for a brief moment, her form shone with an indescribable power. But then came the true greatness, the refusal. She understood that the power of the ring was not a gift, but a trap, And in that moment, she became something even greater than a queen. She became a symbol of wisdom and renunciation. But Galadriel didn't merely offer words to the travelers. She gave them gifts that would be fundamental for the rest of their journey. To Frodo, she gave the Phial of Galadriel, containing the light of Eärendil, the brightest star in the heavens, a symbol of hope for when all other light failed. To Aragorn, she gave a brooch bearing the emblem of Elendil, recognizing his destiny as the heir of Isildur. To Legolas, an elven bow. To Gimli, 3 strands of her own hair, the most precious of all gifts, for it represented the breaking of the distrust between elves and dwarves. Each gift carried a meaning, a connection to a future that only she could foresee. And here is the lesson. True leaders not only command, but empower those around them. Galadriel could have imposed herself as the central figure in events, but she chose instead to trust in the course of destiny and in the strength of those whom many underestimated. The hobbits, small, obscure creatures to most elves, would bear the salvation of the world on their shoulders, and she, in her wisdom, understood that hope doesn't always come from the mighty, but often from the smallest. And most unlikely, with the departure of the Fellowship of the Ring, Galadriel knew that Middle-earth was about to change forever. The time of the elves was dwindling, great battles were on the horizon, and the final fight against Sauron was imminent. But far off, the waters of the west were calling, and Galadriel felt that her destiny was finally coming to fruition. Masquille. War ended, and with it, the last great era of the elves in Middle-earth came to a close. Sauron was defeated, the One Ring destroyed, and the realms of men began to flourish under Aragorn's reign. But for the elves, victory was not a celebration, but a farewell. The weight of the ages rested on Galadriel. She, who had crossed the Helcaraxe, who had fought against Feanor, who had resisted the corruption of the ring, now saw her mission coming to an end. Middle-earth, which had been her home for so long, was no longer a place for the elves. The age of men was beginning, and it was time for the firstborn to depart forever. In one final crossing, Galadriel boarded the Grey Havens alongside Elrond, Gandalf, Frodo, and Bilbo. It wasn't just any journey, it was a return to the original home of the elves, to the immortal lands of Valinor, from where she had departed countless ages ago. But this return was not the same as when she had left those shores. Now she bore the marks of a lifetime of battles, losses, and lessons learned. She had been a queen without a throne, a warrior without an army, a sage without borders. Her legacy remained in Middle-earth, but her destiny lay beyond the sea, and there is something deeply symbolic about that. Galadriel, who had always sought power, who had faced kings and shadows, did what few great leaders ever managed to do. She knew when to depart. Most fight against time, trying to remain even when their era has passed. But not her. The elves were bound to the rings of power, and with the destruction of the One, their own hold over the world began to fade. Lothlorien, once vibrant and untouched by time, began to wither. Everything was changing, and Galadriel understood that change was inevitable. But leaving does not mean disappearing. Her presence would still echo throughout Middle-earth, in the memory of men, in the light she left behind, the Phial of Galadriel, the gifts she bestowed upon the Fellowship of the Ring, the lessons she taught. These would endure even when her name became nothing more than a whisper in elven songs. And that is one of the greatest lessons her story leaves us. The true impact of a life is not measured by how much one imposes oneself, but by what one builds and leaves behind for others. As the ship sailed away and the mortal lands receded into the horizon, Galadriel cast one final glance at Middle-earth, not with sorrow, but with the serenity of one who has fulfilled her purpose. And so, the last great elf of a bygone era departed for the immortal lands, closing one of the most Beautiful chapters in the history of Middle-earth. But as with every great story, her legacy would never be forgotten. Galadriel's story is not merely an epic tale of Middle-earth, it's a lesson in power, wisdom, and choices. How many times have we encountered opportunities to take shortcuts, to pursue power without weighing the consequences? Galadriel teaches us that often true strength lies not in grasping power, but in knowing when to let it go. And now I ask you, how many times in your own life have you had to choose between desire and wisdom? Just as she faced trials to become who she was, we all encounter challenges that shape our destiny. Have you ever thought about what your Silmarils are? Those goals that seem dazzling and unattainable, yet can consume you if pursued without restraint? Have you reflected on which battles are truly worth fighting? Galadriel's journey shows us that patience and long-term vision are as powerful as any sword or magic ring, and furthermore, do you have the right alliances around you? Galadriel forged bonds with those who made a difference in Middle-earth, and that made her unbeatable. Now consider, who are the Gandalfs and Celeborns in your life? Are you surrounded by people who elevate your potential, or by those who merely drain your energy? In the end, great realms are not built alone. If this story has allowed you to see the depth of Tolkien's universe in a new light, then this is only the beginning. There are still many layers to explore, hidden secrets and lessons that can be applied to your own journey. And if you want to keep learning, absorbing more of these epic tales, and discovering incredible connections between fantasy and reality, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this journey through Middle-earth is far from over. Now tell me, what is the greatest lesson that Galadriel has left you? Let's discuss in the comments.